Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which also saw the early Thanksgiving numbers coming in for several films, including Hunger Games, Songbirds and Snakes going into its second weekend of release, and also newcomers Wish and Napoleon. Napoleon definitely punching above its weight, whereas Wish is falling behind what our initial projections were showing and potentially could lose to the second weekend of Songbirds and Snakes. When you look at the daily performance between those two movies and even that of Napoleon, you start to realize that, Disney has clearly lost the family demographic, especially over a holiday frame. It is becoming even more prominent about that. And the only thing that people like Tony over at Deadline can really say to try to argue of a positive is that the film is doing significantly better than what last year's holiday fare had, which was Disney's release of Strange World. But when you just compare these things to what Disney has done in the past and also what is just likely to be the outcome of this opening, it is not looking very good. All of this while the Marvels has just fallen completely off the map, and I cannot say that I'm all that surprised. So all of this plus plenty of more. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up the fire button, obviously smash the rumble button as well, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every time your video live stream goes live on the channel. Also share this video out if you think that other people might find it interesting. So Tony over at Deadline, as you can see, says Songbirds and Snakes singing louder than Wish is 42 million to 41 million. So going to be very, very close between those two over the Thanksgiving stretch. That is the 5-day estimates from what we are seeing here. Whereas Napoleon is securing somewhere between 29 and 33 million. So again, Napoleon doing, I think, a lot better than what some had initially anticipated. However, the film also still cost quite a bit of money. And so the question ultimately is going to be, will it be able to make enough to make its money back? It's been getting some pretty positive word of mouth from a lot of people that I have seen talk about the actual movie. It seems to be one of these, once again, these love-hate relationships people can have with whether it's Ridley Scott movies or just, longer historical epics in general. I've seen the very beginning of it myself, and I can say that I'm kind of not really sold on the idea that you have a person in Joaquin Phoenix who's supposed to be playing a Frenchman, and he doesn't have really any accent whatsoever, but the British still have English accents. It's very, very weird and bizarre, and I don't like when directors do that, but those are just kind of my early thoughts about it. Otherwise, I think there are definitely a lot of things that are worth praising and are worth talking about, but again, I'll give a full review over on Critic List once I've actually finished watching the movie and actually been able to watch the entirety of the movie, I should say. So as you can see right here, it says one piece of good news. Tony, loving to try to find the good news here, especially as the marketplace comes away from the actor strike. Again, also obsessed talking about that, is that this Thanksgiving stretch of Wednesday to Sunday is expected to gross around $190 million for all movies per industry estimates, which is the highest post-pandemic, besting the 5 days of 2022 and of 2021. The big problem, of course, is that this is still not coming in anywhere close to not only the record-breaking 2018 of $315 million, but also well below the 2019 5-day Thanksgiving of $263. So it's very clear that the audiences have not gone back to the theater. I imagine that the lack of content that is actually worth going out to see, or that there at least seems worth going out to see, is just not there. And also, you have to add to that, of course, the incredible rise in ticket prices, amongst other things. Not only that, but also, of course, the domination of things such as streaming services. All of these things coming into play, of course. But again, Tony was going to spend a little bit more time talking about the actor strike, which we proved last week had no actual impact on the box office because they had a week to promote a film like Songbirds and Snakes, and it made no difference in its opening weekend. In fact, one could argue it made less in its opening weekend, but I think that has more to do with them over-projecting versus anything else. It goes on to say, here's a surprise twist as we head into holiday season, though. Lionsgate's The Hunger Games, The Battle of Songbirds and Snakes is neck and neck with Disney's Wish for the #1 spot. Even though Songbirds and Snakes did not win the Wednesday at 7.28 behind Wish's 8.3, and Apple Sony's made 7.7, industry experts have Francis Lawrence directed prequel at around 41.8 $29.8 million over the Wednesday to Sunday of Wish's $40.5 million, the 3-day being 29.3 versus 27.3. So it's just kind of amazing to me, though, that when we're even having this conversation, when we talk about Disney animated movies, right, especially over a holiday frame, those have almost always dominated, right? When you look to the rich history of Disney animated films, almost at any time of the year that they would come out, but especially over a holiday, those would be the films that families would be going out in droves to go and see. That is not happening for this movie. Not only are critics, of course, destroying any comments about the film Wish itself, but many audience members too are coming out of it saying, yeah, you know what, it's really just bland. For a film especially, it's a bland film in and of itself, but then when you add the fact that the film is a 100th year anniversary film and that it's trying to in some way connect all these different films together, as someone who has seen the movie, I can say that I think it does it very, very poorly. I think that it comes across almost as shoehorned in, and it's almost as if they started off with the concept of, hey, for this 100-year movie, let's try to make something that connects everything together. But then they decided to, of course, start off with a really bad idea of, first let's go ahead and try to make this film as diverse as possible and then go from there. That's kind of been the nature of what Disney has been focused on, is they focus more so on trying to have the right the background, right? They're trying to have the right amount of mix within characters, right? The diversity of characters, and they focus on that primarily instead of focusing on the story. And I think it ultimately shows in a movie like this. This is a movie that should have been an easy home run. This is a film that you had all of the different aspects, especially of this being an anniversary, to be the biggest film that's ever been given out by Disney, and instead it just comes across as a B-C level fare. Obviously I did not give it a very high review myself on Criticlist, but I do think that it is still something where it's kind of amazing, right, that this has happened. Now, are there people that are coming out of the film that have liked it? Of course. You do have, of course, these terrible sites that really cannot be trusted, places like CinemaScore, where it's got an A- apparently. But what's interesting is that Frozen 2 also got an A-, and Frozen 2, however, guess what? Made billions of dollars, right? Made an incredible amount of money. So it just goes to show you, right, that, CinemaScore does not actually equal box office, doesn't really, indicate one way or the other about box office, but also, too, right, when you look at both of those movies, to say that those are A- movies, I'm sorry, that's just, that's a bit of a stretch, to say the least. But interesting to see these numbers as they are coming in, because if you look at the number right now, we have this updated coming in right now. We'll go ahead and refresh it. So this is for Wednesday, so we still do not have the actual Thursday numbers in, but of course, all these numbers are going to be somewhat delayed because of the Thanksgiving break. By the way, happy belated Thanksgiving. Hopefully you ate a lot of turkey, had a lot of fun with family and friends, and of course, Black Friday going on today. A lot of great movie deals going on right now. Check out the Blu-ray.com site or the My Movies app on iOS and Android. Not sponsored by them in any way, but that's what I use every year just to see what's going on as far as sales, and there's a lot of them, especially on 4Ks. But we're still waiting on those Thursday numbers is what I was trying to say there. And so if you look at the Wednesday numbers, though, this is kind of what was being said by Tony, right? That Wish did indeed come in at 8.3 million. Napoleon, however, and this is where it's getting even more interesting, actually came in the number 2 spot in this instance. So it actually edged out the Hunger Games numbers there, $7.7 to $7.2 million. So also interesting that, at least according to this, I imagine that this is incorrect. As we all know, sometimes the numbers, just like many of these sites, have the incorrect information when it comes to theaters themselves, but I'm pretty sure this film is in a wide release format. But still, the fact that that's even happening is, I think, pretty amazing. Now, if you look at the overall numbers right now, as far as what's being reported, Wish is looking at around $8.3 million as far as its total as of the recording of this video. And just to give you a kind of an idea, all right, just to give you kind of a framework. So they're projecting the film right now, according to Deadline, to be around $41 million or so. If that indeed holds, right, if it does get to $41 million, compare that to the first Sunday, right, which did not get a full release because this film came out earlier the year, Elemental. Elemental was at $29.6 million. So without a holiday, guess what? The movie ended up only making another $10 million in comparison, right? Wish made another $10 million, at least in its projections. And if you look at the first week of its release, comparing that, right, going all the way to its first, Thursday, Friday, you start to see a little bit of a comparable number there. So it's going to be interesting to see this battle. As we all know, Elemental did leg out quite a bit. It did a lot better down the stretch. Its first 2 weeks only accounted for 25% of the entire box office, which is very impressive. However, that film still cost $200 million, just as Wish did, and it was still not able to actually make its money back. And a lot of the money that it made was ultimately coming from those international numbers, right? As you can see, the domestic 154 versus the international 332. And what we've seen is that consistently the domestic market has just not been showing up quite as much as it used to for a lot of the animated fare coming out of Disney. So we'll be following that comparison, especially as these numbers begin to update, but just to give you kind of a bit of a comparison there. Whereas a film like Napoleon, again, the new film from Ridley Scott, getting some mixed reviews. It seems to be driving out, though, that older demographic that has been waiting for films like this, or does not really come out to see movies except for films like this. So it'll be interesting to see and follow this film. Still a little too early to tell exactly where this movie will end up. Hunger Games: Battle of Songbirds snakes at $119 million. And I think that the reason why this movie is being talked about so much is because people like Tony at Deadline can look at it and say, well, you know what? We can say this film is a financial success because it doesn't need to make a lot of money to actually break even because of the way they financed this movie. And had a lot of different foreign sales amongst, foreign distribution sales, things like that. They only really need to make around 120, 130 domestic, according to Tony and others, to actually break even, because even though they spent $100 million production budget, a lot of this cost got covered in these behind the scenes deals. So if that's the only argument you have is saying, well, it made money. Remember, just because a film makes money or has profit does not mean that the film is successful. There's been a ton of bad movies that have made money. There's been a ton of great films also that have not made money. The point of this, though, is to say, okay, where does this actually stand in the grand scheme of, one, all the films that have come out this past year, and two, in the actual comparison of the other Hunger Games movies? This film is nowhere close. And it's not going to be anywhere close to the previous Hunger Games films. Remember, the opening weekend alone, we're talking there about, 12 million was the lowest opening weekend domestic ticket sales for the last of the original Hunger Games films. This movie only got about 3 million. So a massive, massive drop there. And I don't think that it's going to be getting any better or improving. And so though the film is doing, I guess, better than expected, I'm not expecting a whole lot from this film going forward. Another film that I'm expecting even less from is The Marvels, which has essentially just fallen off the face of the earth. This film is down in the dumps. Looking at a comparison here, right? So a previous from this year box office flop in DC's The Flash, right? Different studio, but notice how just much of a difference there is between these two films. So first, we've got a battle between Marvel's Flash and Shazam. Now Marvel's is nowhere near the level of Shazam. Remember, Shazam ended its entire run at $132 million worldwide. It just did not do anything. But what's interesting is when you compare that to both The Flash and The Marvels, what you're starting to see is that Marvels is tracking to not get to $100 million domestic. And it's looking to not get anywhere close to The Flash's 158. So that $266 million number that The Flash hit, that's not going to be possible at this point as far as the numbers are concerned right now for the Marvels. So $200 million is even kind of on the table as far as a question mark at the very least. So a film that's likely not going to get to $100 million domestic has a good chance of not getting to $200 million international. It's bad. It's really, really bad. Look at these daily numbers, right? 1.5 million is the reported number for that second Wednesday compared to the 1.5, again, around that amount for the Flash. And remember, the Flash in its second week dropped off a cliff. So it just saw massive drops after massive drops. We're seeing the same kind of drops and even the same kind of numbers in many ways, in many respects, when you look at the Marvels as well. Notice how a film like Shazam was around $672,000 at that same point. So again, this movie, The Marvels, is not anywhere near the Shazam, the lowest point. But the fact that it's getting close to being under $1 million a day, and it got pretty close on its second Monday at $1.1 million, I would not be surprised, especially when next week, the third week comes around, that just like these other two movies were under $1 million, in some cases very much under $1 million, same thing will probably happen for the Marvels as well. Now, what's interesting also about all of these things is looking at the actual estimates going on for Box Office Pro's numbers. So remember, looking at the 5-day numbers, the 5-day estimates for these movies, remember that Deadline and the so-called industry experts are predicting it to be around 42 million to 41 million of Songbirds and Snakes versus the number for Wish, whereas in this number right here, we're seeing a very different occurrence, right? For Box Office Pro, they are projecting a 5-day domestic of $56 million. So we know that that is not going to happen. So Wish coming in well underneath those projections, whereas Napoleon is actually, it looks like they're getting it right. Napoleon is being projected as a 5-day total to be around 32.5 million. That's about what was being said over here on Deadline's site. Let's go ahead and see if we can get that. Yeah, $29 to $33 million. So it looks like they were indeed correct in those estimates there. Whereas it's the Hunger Games this film that's actually kind of, hitting above its weight, right? So originally expected to get to $29.8 million in its 5-day numbers, 5-day total for the holiday, and it's expected to make another 10 million or so. So this film definitely seems to be punching above its weight, at least in comparison to the projections, whereas Wish is falling off that cliff. And I can't really say I'm all that surprised by it. And you go all the way down here, and the Marvels, right, dropping off the face of the earth, still in a wide release, but they're dropping it from quite a number of theaters because there's just no money in it at this point in time. So we got all these films coming out. We, of course, got Thanksgiving. It's a horror film, seems to be doing a lot better. We have Trolls as well, expected to have a pretty strong hold as well. And we'll do a full box office breakdown of that sometime on Sunday as those numbers come in. But all of this, of course, as we have other projections coming out now for other movies. So obviously Godzilla Minus One is the only film I'm really excited about at this point that has yet to come out this year. And that film, unfortunately, has a very low number. And I think the big reason as to why the projections are so low is probably because it is going to be a foreign release, meaning it's going to be subtitled in most theaters. And a lot of people tend not to be going out to those kinds of movies. It just happens to be the case that most audience members don't want to read subtitles. That's just an unfortunate fact of life. I personally love that. I think that it should always be seen in the original language if you have that possibility. But still, very fascinating to see. I'm going to be actually interested if this number ends up creeping up in this latest update. They have not creeped this up at all, but I'm hoping this film does better. I know I'm excited to see it in the next week or so. So very much looking forward to that. Whereas we also have projections for films like Wonka. And this is kind of the main point of kind of bringing this back to the films like Hunger Games and Wish and the Marvels, and to a certain extent, even Napoleon, though Napoleon, I think, is kind of, going against this, which is that these bigger films, right? Films like Wonka, domestic opening, 25 to 35 million. That's abysmal. We now have numbers for Aquaman as well, $32 to $42 million in its opening weekend projections. So what we're seeing right now are these massive, massive over-budgeted movies, seeing massive financial losses and projected financial losses. All the while, you have other films that are getting, it seems, some natural word of mouth. And guess what? It seems like they're doing a bit better than what was expected. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to all of these movies, they have quite a bit to make up. Napoleon, a $200 million budget. The film needs to make roughly $500+ million to break even. So this is still a film that's far from its break-even point. Wish is not looking like it's going to get anywhere close to that number, especially as it continues to track lower than expected. And a film like The Hunger Games, even though the movie obviously is tracking in a much better direction than what was originally thought, it is still not looking to be a film that, may reach its break-even point of $250 million. Now, again, that's a typical break-even point. I know that because the film is financed differently, it's going to break even long before that. But still, that's going to be far away, even if it does happen to reach the 250. And again, I'll make some projections on Sunday when we get the actual numbers going in. But even if it does hit that 250 number, that's still going to be so far removed from the originals in that franchise, and hard for one to argue that it is enough to really justify making any more films if they had planned on doing so. But anyway, a little bit of a long video today for a preview, but I thought it was important because we have a lot of numbers that are obviously coming in as we have this holiday weekend. But what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that we're going to see films like Wish completely bomb? Right now, it's looking like that is probably going to be the case, especially because of just the massive budget that it has for it, and Disney has proven again and again and again, especially this year alone, to be not having any real box office winners, right? They have some of the biggest flops of this year, and because they have so many of these movies that have cost so much money, that means that they have so many flops that are incoming. Add to that, you have other studios like Warner Brothers also having a ton of flops. The only bright spot really for them this year is the Barbie film, and even that movie they still were splitting the revenue with and was not able to make up for any of their losses. And it's looking like Aquaman's probably going to have even more financial losses for them. So what are y'all's thoughts about any of these movies, right? Let me know if you thought Wish is going to end up being a bomb. Napoleon, do you think that this movie is going to actually pull above its weight? Do you think it's going to have more of that Oppenheimer effect? Obviously, it doesn't have any Barbenheimer stuff going on for it, but do you think Napoleon is going to be able to definitely do a lot better like, Oppenheimer was able to do, for instance? But unfortunately, a film like, I say unfortunately, I haven't seen it yet, but a film like Killers of the Flower Moon from Scorsese was not able to do that in any way, whereas where both Napoleon and also Killers of the Flower Moon Moon, I believe, are both, as far as connections to Apple TV, are both connected in that way. So do you think that that film is going to end up doing better, at the very least better than what we saw from a film like For Kills the Flower Moon? We'll have to wait and see, of course. And then lastly, Hunger Games and the Marvels. I think Hunger Games is going to make its money back on paper, obviously, beyond even just those extra tax credits and other rebates and other behind the scenes stuff that they did. Do you think it'll kind of on its own, as a typical movie, looking as a typical movie, make its money back, make some profit? And then the Marvels, how much do you think it's going to lose? Because at this point, it's going to lose quite a bit. The question is how much. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. A lot of the fun about smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Make sure that you check out, of course, all the different deals going on right now for physical media. Big proponent of physical media here. Also, things look a little bit different because I got a new desk. Shout out to the lady Freya for helping me set this up the other day. And I'm still trying to figure these different things out and try to, maximize the space. But anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed Thanksgiving break. And as always, God bless. And now for a special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members for the month of November, starting off with Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, the name Eagle Rider. Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. Matt317, check out his Twitch channel. Laura, the Modern Major General Story. Sorry, I didn't have enough spirit fingers there. Mr. Roy and ZK Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below. You get access to things like the giveaways channel, a podcast that I try to do every single month with a bunch of other awesome YouTubers, and a plethora of other content. So go ahead and check that out if you want more. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.